Welcome to Dev Chats, a new semi-regular feature on the Left Behind Game Club podcast feed. Today we begin this feature with Chris Wade. He is the developer behind the newly released Sausage Sports Club, a physics game about floppy animals playing sports. It's available now on Nintendo Switch and PC. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
So, the first question I want to ask you is, when did you know that you wanted to make games?
I think my answer to this maybe isn't that interesting, because for a lot of people it's like really early. They know from when they're a kid, there was like a moment that they remember or something. But for me, I didn't really know. And I got to college and kind of looked at like the sheet of all the majors you can pick from. And I had grown up playing games and stuff like that, but I never thought of it as a career. And I got to this list, and just game development was one of the majors you could pick at the college I went to in Chicago, DePaul. And I picked that and just started taking classes. And I had kind of like messed around with game development tools in high school a little bit, like modding levels in Left 4 Dead, and I'd messed with Game Maker a little bit, but it never stuck, and I never made anything that good. But in college, those skills kind of transferred, and I kind of like found it was really interesting, and the problem solving was fun, and it just like meshed really well with me. So I eventually decided this was for me, and I got into it that way.
And you did a lot of game jams when you were in college, right?
Yeah, totally. It was actually like, I was a sophomore in college, and I didn't know what a game jam was, and somebody I knew who was an upperclassman invited me, and I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds really fun. And I went to that, and our team did really well, made a really cool game. And this was basically my first time like making a game outside of class for fun or whatever. And the game was really cool, and I was totally hooked on that feeling of like making this thing from scratch that like other people would engage with and like have fun with. So after that, I was like, game jams are the best. I'm just going to do this as much as I can. And it was totally hard to get started because at that time, I wasn't really like a good programmer. I'd just taken like one class. Mm-hmm. And I just started doing game jams, and over time got better. And I think I used Unity for every game jam after that first one, and got to know that tool really well. And the better you know a tool, the better you can make things with it. And the more like experience you have making games, the more you'll like be able to make better decisions at every crossroad or whatever. So I got better by doing that. And obviously from my like degree program or whatever.
For anyone that may not necessarily know what a game jam is, how would you describe not only what you do during a game jam, but kind of the energy throughout a game jam weekend or, longer?
Yeah, sure. So background is a game jam is a period of time where you alone or you and a group of people work together to make a game from start to finish, like a complete thing from an idea all the way to a playable game that you can distribute to your friends or whatever. And it's usually a weekend, like 48 hours. And during that time, everybody has like set aside this time as the thing they're going to do for this weekend. And so they're really focused on it. Everybody's on the same page. And because the time frame is so short, you have to make decisions like really quickly without, thinking about it too much, and you just have to use what you know. You can't like do research or like make practice levels or practice mechanics or whatever. You just have to like dig into it. And so it's kind of this like really exciting tornado of just like making a creative piece of work really fast with people. And you also end up getting really close with the people you do this with, because you're like kind of locked together in a room or whatever over a weekend. And there's like usually a lot of opportunities to talk and like hang out. And so it's just like a really cool experience for all those reasons.
What's the best game that you made at a game jam when you were in college?
There was one that I made during the train jam, which is like that one's like 72 hours where you take a train from Chicago to San Francisco, the week before GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, where people are like learning to make games and networking and doing all this like game industry focused meeting and listening to talks and stuff like that. But on the Train Jam, it's like 300 game developers working together making games on this train. And during that, I teamed up with a few other devs from Chicago who are really good. And the first day of the jam, we just were all like really in sync. And I came up with this idea for a sword fight on rails. Imagine like a sine wave, and on the sine wave, there's two little dots. Each one is controlled by a different player, and you're using your left stick to move this dot around. And then with the right stick, you're swinging a sword to try to attack the other dot.
Okay.
And one of the people on our team, Eric Huang, who worked on Battle Chef and a bunch of other stuff, is like this amazing like VFX artist and just like made these amazing flashy animations and stuff for this game. And it, along with this like interesting kind of unique gameplay mechanic of like two dots moving along a rail, fighting each other with swords, and Eric's like crazy effects, and just everybody on the team kind of immediately being in sync and being on the same page about what it was. It just turned out really fun and interesting, and that would be the best one I made during school, I would say.
Were there any difficulties about developing a game on a train?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, like you're not always going to have internet on a cross-country trip on a train. There's a period of the train jam where you're like up in the mountains and there's just no internet for like an entire day basically. And if you know your tools really well and you've had a lot of experience making games or programming or whatever, you're gonna be okay. But if you're new or something, you need to Google stuff constantly. So I know a lot of people forget software that they need, like they don't have the right program, or like not everybody on their team is on the same version of Unity or GameMaker or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's a big pain point. And then some people will like download documentation, like the docs of their engine or whatever beforehand, and that's always a good move for that kind of situation. Also, if you don't know something, chances are somebody on this train of 300 game developers is going to know it. So sometimes people will like run down the train yelling like, "Who can tell me what the dot product does?" Or like, "How do I don't know, like how do I get these physics to work?" Or what am I?
Who knows this plugin?
Yeah, for sure.
So what happens at the end of the train jam?
At the end of the train jam, everybody gets off the train at once, and we have like kind of a wrap up meeting or whatever, where the leader of the group or whatever, Adriel, just kind of like announces we're done and explains what's going to happen at GDC, where they have like booths set up to display the games that were made on the train, which is kind of this added pressure of like industry professionals are going to see whatever you made in 3 days or whatever. So you kind of have to bring it. That's basically the end of it. And then we all get on buses and stuff and go into the city.
And is that how you landed your first jobs? Because when you finished at DePaul, you worked in the Chicago game dev, community, right?
Yeah. So I worked in the co-working space, the Indie City Co-op, for 3 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that kind of came out of during school. I like did internships and stuff at different game studios, and from that, one of my titles at one of those jobs was as a contractor. This was on Mortal Kombat, and when I finished that, since that was my title, I started just pitching myself as a contractor, and people would hear that and say, "Oh, I can hire this guy to like do a short temporary contract or whatever on my project." So I was getting hired for that kind of stuff, and then eventually that just stuck, where I kind of had this resume of doing that sort of thing, and it was, I'm more trustworthy to people looking to hire if I have like several jobs under my belt and if I'm already marketing myself as a contractor. And so that turned into like more and more legit and interesting jobs like Chef Brigade and Manifold Garden at some point.
Yeah, so you worked at for companies like Phosphor Games, you worked for Robomoto, for NetherRealms, as you mentioned. So how did you get involved, if I'm understanding the chronology right, with the folks that made Chef Brigade? How did you get involved with that project?
So at some point after working at NetherRealm on Mortal Kombat, like I said, I was like pitching myself as a contractor, and Will, who works on Manifold Garden, decided he was going to hire me to work as a programmer, as a contractor on that. And at that time, I think I was like finishing up school, or maybe it was like the year before I finished or whatever. But during that summer, there was at the Indie City Co-op I mentioned, the co-working space in Chicago where a lot of indies work. There was like a student fellowship program that they ran that year, where they picked a bunch of promising students to come to the co-op, and basically like they had a free desk for the summer to come work on a project together that was kind of going to represent the co-op and be a good learning experience for the students, and also like a networking opportunity to like meet people in the co-op. So I had this free desk to do that project. And I decided I was going to work on Manifold Garden out of the co-op just full time as my contract thing, so I could get to know all the people in that co-op, and just because they were cool people, and I like figured I could learn from people working next to them in a co-working space. And one of the teams there happened to be Chef Brigade. And so over the course of that summer, I got close to them, would like go to them with problems I was having with Unity, or they would ask me if they were like interested in some shader thing, since that was like my specialty around that time. And I just kind of clicked with that group. So when I finished that project, they kind of approached me before it was like, as soon as I told everybody there, like, I'm going to finish my project here. I'll like stick around for a while, but unless I find work, whatever, I won't be able to stay. And so they were immediately like, hey, you should come do programming for us, because we need somebody to do that. And it was just that easy. Like it was like the same day they asked me if I was interested. And I think that was a Friday, and on the Monday following that, I started working on Battle Chef.
And how many people are a part of Trinket that made Battle Chef Brigade?
So the core team is 3 people, Tom, Eric, and Ben. And it's 2 programmers and an artist. And then everybody else that worked on that game is contract or temporary. And after the main 3, I was the person that worked on it for the longest as like their contract programmer or whatever. And then there must be like 15 contract artists or something that helped with the food art in that game, or like animating monsters and characters and stuff.
You've named things that were very dope about that game. So
yeah.
I really appreciated the pitch for that game was essentially match 3 puzzle game plus Iron Chef plus Dungeons and Dragons, and I was so in with that pitch.
Yeah, it's super good. I was so glad and so fortunate to be able to work on that, because it's just that pitch alone, anybody's going to get excited for that. And they happen to be a great team of like really smart people.
And did you kind of pick up kind of the BizDev chops as well, kind of as you were involved with that project, or was that largely just dev focused?
That was dev focused. I would say that being in the co-op, being in the co-working space in general, is where I picked up the BizDev chops, because at that same time, while I was working on Manifold Garden, I had already started Sausage Sports Club and was kind of prototyping it and trying to figure out what I wanted it to be. And I knew that I wanted it to be a commercial game. So anytime something came up where, somebody with more business experience than me would have like some advice for me, I would just go to them and be like, hey, I'm thinking about taking the game to PAX. Do you think it makes sense to do that? How much do you think it would cost to do that? Like, what's the timeline of getting things ready? What are the pitfalls and stuff? And they would, all the teams there already had done this like multiple times. So it was just like it was a really good environment for me to be like nurtured into being able to make the game I made.
And, it's actually funny because that's where I first played your game, was at PAX West, as you
Nice.
launched the Kickstarter. What did you learn anything? This game was a Kickstarter. So
Yeah.
did you learn anything throughout the Kickstarter process, both as you were kind of getting funding and as you were communicating before the game's release? Did you learn any lessons as you were going?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I could talk for an hour about all the things that you learn from a Kickstarter. I would say one of the big things that I am really glad that I did a Kickstarter for is like preparing and running the Kickstarter very much mirrored the experience of launching the game, where I had to get all these promotional materials ready. I had to cut a trailer. I had to do revisions on a trailer. I had to get like press email and content creator email and try to like craft good emails to like make sure these people would want to play the game and be interested and to look like a professional. I had to do all the like business setup to like make sure Kickstarter was going to like send me money without, claiming that I was being a fake. There's a lot of paperwork you have to do to set that kind of stuff up.
I think it was it August of 16 where you launched the Kickstarter?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So when you launched in August of 16, you were at PAX, and at PAX, I think you said you had a few days left in the actual campaign, and were you close to your funding goal at that point, or had you hit your funding goal when you were at PAX?
It hit the funding goal at PAX, but it was pretty close when I got there. Like throughout the whole campaign, the game kind of like did all of the things it needed to do in the first third, where it was like pretty certain that I was going to hit the goal. Mm-hmm. Like with a Kickstarter, if you get past 60% ever in the whole Kickstarter, you're like 70% likely to succeed. And I did that within the first week, I think, or in the first 2 weeks or something. So it was like, it seemed very likely that the Kickstarter was going to succeed like weeks before that. And then I think it was like out of the 4 days that PAX West was, it was the second day that it succeeded, I think.
What surprised you about the game's business most as you were developing this game and getting ready to put it out?
So during the Kickstarter, over the course of the whole month, the Kickstarter video got maybe 6,000 views or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's, at the time I was like, that seems fine. Like it succeeded, whatever. But at PAX West last year, about a year ago, Nintendo featured the game at their like Nindies arcade or whatever, and announced the game was going to be coming to Switch on their like Nindies showcase, whatever that they do every so often. And it was like insane when that happened. Like the 6,000 views of the Kickstarter was nothing, and it was extremely surprising to me how much power these like platform holders have that you can't even like, you don't even have a glimpse of like the reach that they have, even if you try your best over like if I tweeted every day constantly like amazing content all the time for a year, that would not be as good as like one video on Nintendo's YouTube channel. And that really, like, at the same time, it was really scary that individuals or like small companies like what I am right now can't really hope to do that. But it was also really enlightening in that your strategy shouldn't just be to build your own community. It should also be to like make your game look really good to those kind of platform holders, and to try to get your game ready for like the new life cycle of the next platform, whatever that might be, so that you can be there early. And that was like a totally eye-opening moment that I didn't, as an outsider, I had no idea.
And so your game is on Switch and PC,
right.
So you're console exclusive to the Switch.
Yeah.
What has it been like to work with Nintendo and their Nindies program?
Yeah. It's been really good. Like I said, they had this like insane power to like promote the game in a way that I couldn't, and being able to like get through that, even as like the very small team that I am, with no former like projects to say like, hey, look, I made this really good thing, like you should trust me. It was really cool of them to like say yes, and then when the game was inevitably delayed, to be like, no, it's fine, just like do what you got to do. We'll be there when you're ready to come out, whatever. It was great. Their team is really cool. They're really supportive. Both of the like Nindie rep guys like tweeted about the game the day it came out, and that it was just cool to see that support.
And so you posted on your Kickstarter, and I just wanted to ask you specifically about this. So you made a joke about feature creep on your Kickstarter, and when the game was initially pitched, and correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't pitched with an adventure mode. But you know, later throughout the game's development, you added a feature like a big adventure mode. In comparison just to the multiplayer aspects of it. Can you describe kind of what how that came about, how it affected the final product, and maybe kind of what you learned from that?
So that came about as a result of a lot of market research I was doing of other games in the similar kind of local multiplayer or physics or I don't know, like sports-ish sorts of games. I did a lot of research into how those games were doing and just like how many were coming out, how often they were coming out, how many made enough for their creators to like make other games or whatever. And what I was noticing is if your game doesn't have online and if it's only local multiplayer and there's no like other modes in the game, those games tend to do way worse than than if you have a single player or if you have online. And online was just totally infeasible for me in the time frame that I wanted to ship the game. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a one person. I do all of the actual game stuff, and it would just take like an incredible amount of time. And the game is a physics game, which like has unique challenges of like networking. If there's 100 physics objects in a scene, that's a lot more complicated than like a first person shooter that has no physics in it.
Right.
I guess the next part of that would be adventure mode was kind of a solution to that, where if I knew I knew I couldn't do online. I knew I wanted to have a single player or co-op kind of thing. And that felt right with the spirit of the game too, of having like co-op and a way to play that wasn't just competitive.
Right.
So those two needs kind of met. And then it was, what does that look like in Sausage Sports Club? And there needed to be some other like framing of a single player. So that was like season mode. And then at a similar time where I was like worried about this, like I don't have a single player thing, I was noticing at conventions between matches, players would just like goof around and have fun and like knock around physics objects or like use their head to dance and beat with the music and do these like really cool playful things that I wanted them to do. But and I had this idea that there should be toys to play with, like different ways to encourage that kind of behavior. And the arenas were like pretty well defined, and there wasn't really space for that sort of thing, especially in the already kind of confusing mode where you select what game type you want to play. There's already a bunch of crap in that scene, so I wanted to try having a different area to like play around in, and and then the overworld and adventure mode kind of came out of that, those two needs together.
I think I saw a picture on your Twitter where you had all the objects that you had that you'd made in the game kind of just laid out there, and there were probably over 100 objects that you had designed in the game, and I'm sure had their own physics tied to them. Correct?
Yep. I haven't actually counted them, but there's probably over 100. There's 60 hats in the game, so that's like it's definitely over 100 if you include the hats.
Adding the adventure mode, was feature creep kind of a problem for you as you were, developing the game and getting ready for it to come out?
I think if you look at the game in terms of like, I wanted to release on this date and I kept missing that, then that was definitely a problem for me. But I think the way I approach this game and the way a lot of designers approach their games as like an in progress, like I'm not sure what this is yet, I'm going to discover it as I go and try to like work on things that will make the game what it should be, instead of like what the timeline is going to require. I like that's what I did, and the game would be a lot worse if I hadn't done that. And I recognize that every time I push the deadline back, that like I'm doing this because the game isn't what I want it to be. It's not meeting its design goals yet. And if I hadn't done that, then the game would be bad and nobody would want it anyway. So it was definitely a problem, but I think it was like a reasonable problem considering the outcome, which is that the game ended up good.
So you just released Sausage Sports Club, and now I believe in December of last year you started at Owlchemy Labs in Austin. So you moved across the country. That must have been really tough. Yeah.
It was kind of a weird timing for the game, just because I was trying to ship at that point, and it was kind of a surprise move for me. Like, I didn't like. The job kind of popped up as an offer out of nowhere, and I was trying to ship the game, so it was a surprise. And for me, doing this move was a move so I could have some stability, whether or not the game succeeded, so that in the future I'd be able to make choices out of like rational decision making, instead of like running out of money and being desperate for like any job or whatever. In looking back on it, it was a really good decision because I really like working at Owlchemy. The switch to doing VR stuff has been really cool. It's like a totally new design paradigm, and the Austin indie scene is pretty vibrant and interesting, and it's been cool to get to know people here and just like see a new city and what the differences are from Chicago and stuff.
Final question. If you were able to talk to maybe 17-year-old Chris and give him one piece of advice about his future, what would that piece of advice be?
That's interesting. I would say keep on trucking. Like, do what seems right. Like, make the best choices you can, and don't worry about it too much, because it's pretty good on this end. Yeah, I don't really regret any decisions I made in college, especially career-wise. Like, I'm excited that this game is out. I'm excited about the job I'm at now. Maybe take more pictures so you can remember stuff better. But yeah, I don't know. It's been a blast, and my past self didn't fuck up too bad.
Chris, thanks so much for your time. And did you want to kind of give the final pitch about Sausage Sports Club, where people can find it, where they can find you, etc., etc.?
Yeah, sure. Once again, Sausage Sports Club is a physics game about floppy animals playing sports. It's out now on Nintendo Switch and Steam. You can get it on the eShop or on Steam. And then you can follow me on Twitter at ChrisWade __.
And that's it. You can follow everything Left Behind Game Club at leftbehindgame.club, on Twitter at leftbehindclub, on Instagram at leftbehindgameclub. And if you want to follow me specifically on social media, you can do so at Jacob McCourt. Thanks so much for listening to the first of our Dev Chats.